Today we visit a plant collector's paradise situated on 80 impeccably manicured acres. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart from Oregon. Today we visit Oregon Garden, located in Silverton, Oregon, known as the Gateway to Silver Falls. Located on the banks of the Silver River, this burgeoning community is known for its cafes, restaurants, and shops, as well as having a deep sense of community. Oregon Gardens is an 80-acre botanical garden featuring more than 20 specialty gardens showcasing the diverse botanical beauty that can be found in the Willamette Valley and throughout the Pacific Northwest. It hosts one of the largest collections of miniature conifers in the country in its conifer garden. Also of note is its wetlands habitat, which cools the city of Silverton's treated wastewater through a series of pools and brims with local wildlife. The garden also promotes sustainability through green roofs, composting, and edible landscaping. Today we meet Ty Boland, the garden's botanical curator, to take a behind-the-scenes look at this amazing garden. Ty, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oregon Gardens is such a beautiful place, and you've put so much heart and so much work into it, and we can really see the impact of that. Before we tour the gardens, I want to talk about one thing that I think is foundational to this site, and it kind of goes back to the origin of Oregon Gardens, and that's the Wetlands System.
Absolutely. Yeah, back in the day, they wanted to produce a botanical garden or somewhere out in the Willamette Valley. In the meantime, the city of Silverton was trying to figure out what they were going to do to cool down their effluent wastewater coming out of the plant. They ended up procuring this piece of land and installed a system of effluent cooling ponds. We're sitting on, about a good 150 feet of elevation from the top pond to the bottom pond, so it's all gravity fed. It's pumped up 2 miles from the city of Silverton. It enters our very top cell, heads all the way down halfway through, and we actually utilize that for our irrigation purposes. And then what we don't use continues on down to the lower mediation ponds where it enters into Brush Creek. Yeah.
So the idea, if I got this right, is that with each pond, there's, there are plants there that are soaking up with their heavy metals, et cetera, what might be in the water, and then also just natural settling that occurs in each pool, right?
Absolutely. So, this is a man-made wetland, and it is a tool, and the plant material that we have out here, all of it is a tool. It was all put here for a purpose. A lot of the large trees are going to help shade these ponds because, as I mentioned, the water was a little bit too warm. And then there was some thought about the plant material. Obviously, native things like cattails and whatnot, they have large roots, a lot of carbo storage, and those will help to mitigate any of the, like high nutrient loads or some metals, as well as arrowroot or wapato, which was actually a very important carbohydrate source for the native people that lived in this area. It grows very, very well, and that also will take up any of the extra material that could possibly be coming through this effluent and trapping it biologically so it does not enter into the stream system. But like any system, it has to be maintained. The plants out here are tools, and by no means can you just let them go. In fact, last year, the city of Silverton came out and they dredged all of these ponds to increase the flow as well as remove some of the invasive material. And as you can see, 6 months on, everything is filling back in, and we actually were able to get back a lot of the earlier plantings that we put in, i.e., the wapato and some of the other select plant material that we put in here to help mitigate.
Okay, so these were plants that you introduced. Some of them naturally come in like on the feet of birds or whatever, right? Yeah. So, but it's a beautiful biodiverse place, and it's a wonderful. I think it's a wonderful lesson in the power that plants have to actually clean our water.
Yeah.
What a wonderful system! It's great for people to come out here and actually see how this works.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, and we have trails that are set all around and in through this upper wetland portion too, so you can really kind of sneak peek and get a look of what's going on in there.
So, Ty, what are some ways that for the home gardener that they can be engaged in water remediation?
Well, for instance, I have 2 staff members out here, and at their separate houses, they have a system of rain barrels, actually. Mm-hmm. They have a beautiful garden that's planted around it. In fact, I didn't even notice that they had a 25,000 gallon cistern, and that gets them through the entire summer. The other thing is, you know, some of the drought tolerant plantings that they can put in. But I would say rain barrels. I know some people out here that actually have some extra land, and they will dig large, basically pond systems.
Right.
Get those things lined out, have an aerator going in there just to kind of keep the algae down. And they will do that all wintertime, and in the summer, they'll throw a pump in there, and they'll be able to irrigate, because if you don't, if you don't have water rights, even if you're close to the streams or the rivers, you can't water out of there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize the natural rainfall or even, anything else like that to irrigate. There are some people too, and you're starting to see it in the tiny house trend. Right. People are utilizing their gray water because, the plumbing and all the systems are a little different. So they will have separate sink water or shower water that will go through, and then you can utilize that for some of your plantings too.
Yeah, in so many parts of the country, we're surrounded by pavement.
Yeah.
And so this water that's coming, the roof shed water is basically just going into the stormwater system, oftentimes causing flooding. Mm-hmm. And this water can be retained on the property and used for irrigation. It's so much more sustainable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Terry, when we think about horticulture in Oregon, it's hard to not have conifers be one of the first things that pop into our minds. It's such an amazing and diverse grouping of plants, and of course they love living here in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And you have a wonderful collection here. It's a great place for people to come explore plants, learn about different species and cultivars, and figure out what might work in their garden. Absolutely. Or what may not be as ideal.
Absolutely, yeah. It is absolutely fantastic. I'll tell you that myself. We are a reference garden for the American Conifer Society, and we're one of the crown jewels of that. We have it set up as though it would be kind of someone's backyard, mm-hmm. By no means is it a scientific sort of a thing. It's just to display all of this beautiful coniferous material. There's a lot of different companion plantings and other material coming up. Conifers, a lot of people think as though that they're just going to be a giant pine tree. Though we have a lot of large specimens in here, we're really trying to focus on the dwarf and miniature conifers, mm-hmm. because we all find them incredibly interesting, but you can also pack a whole lot in to show everybody. I feel as though that, out in this region, conifers, are the backbone of any good landscape,
Sure.
And that's what's really going to provide you with that four-season garden, is by incorporating them. And so having a lot of these different cultivars on display out here, gives a lot of people some really good ideas. Oh, I never thought about introducing that into my garden. And because, as you mentioned, out here in the Willamette Valley, there's so many growers. There's all kinds of resources for people to go and find a lot of this material.
Yeah, I think the dwarf conifers also it's a great way to experience a plant that would be impractical for most gardens.
Absolutely.
My garden's quite small, and so I don't have the luxury of being able to grow a deodar cedar. That's probably more in line with most people's gardens.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have acres and acres they can plant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so the dwarfs are a great fit.
Absolutely. What I find interesting, a lot of people wonder where these cultivars come from. Are they just, from the seed, the little pine cone go down and then grow this plant, or did somebody breed it? A lot of this is just witch's broom. It's plant nerds that were out there growing this stuff on. Oh, what's that weird little bunch of stuff going on there? And then you graft it and you grow it on. And so this garden's actually a wonderful tool to educate guests as they come in. For instance, we have a very, very large Sequoiadendron giganteum. Mm-hmm. It's a blue one. It was getting in the way. We were going to chop it down, and then it got struck by lightning. So now we're going to keep it because it's a beautiful, it's incredible. It's right on the other side over there. So we have that as a natural form, and then right across the way, we have Sequoiadendron giganteum pendula. Right?
Right.
And somebody just noticed that there was a weird little whoopy thing coming off of it. They cut it and grafted it. And you see a lot of Sequoiadendron giganteum pendulas, in this area around buildings. The architecture's pretty nice. You can fit it in a smaller area while still have that giant sequoia look. I have like one of the world's smallest giant sequoias, Sequoiadendron giganteum, but 10 years old. It's only about this big right there. And so, showing people that this is the same, like very, very similar genetics with the exception of one weird little tick, but you can plant a giant Doug fir, a giant pine in your yard, or any of those things you think would be big, have that aesthetic, but have it in this small form. And it's all the plant dorks that are out there producing this stuff that are making this available. And this garden is where we get to showcase all that material.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the companion plants, because of course the conifers, they provide a wonderful backdrop and also a great foreground too. But what you've done, I think, very artfully here is putting in these splashes of color, adding textures like ornamental grasses, and I think that that's what really makes this garden super special.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, any time of the year, you're going to see stuff that's going to be flowering in and amongst this garden. You know, we come at this stylistically, you know, is kind of a fusion between, you know, like a Japanese sort of style garden, and then we have this kind of Northwest flavor. You know, there's a lot of basalt out here. There's a lot of different alpine plantings and whatnot that we have around here. So you'll notice we have a lot of heaths and heathers, as well as small little native irises and things like that. You know, a lot of things that will come up, splash color, and then just kind of fade away, you know, with the exception of, say, the grasses, which are, you know, they provide just a different texture. And it's all just about color and texture.
Bees have been in the news a lot lately, and of course, for very good reason. The pollinators are responsible for the lion's share of our food supply.
Absolutely.
And so as we see things like, you know, hive collapse going on, you know, it's something that we should be very concerned about. And as gardeners, just the importance of bees, the role that they play in the garden, and of course, it's so cool to see one up close and personal. My dad had multiple beehives growing up, and so you know, these are very active, happy hives. Tell me a little about them.
About 4 years ago, we decided that we wanted an apiary display out here, specifically for this, you know, those reasons. I mean, we're, you know, a botanical garden. We're open to the public. Where our job is to educate people about all things gardening. And one of the most important things about gardening is the pollinators, be it bees, be it anything else. And so to have this display out here was really interesting. We experimented with sourcing broodstock and some queens from kind of all over the place, primarily in California, which is, you know, where we were sourcing them, is say 1,000, 2,000 miles away from us. Well, 1,000 miles. 2 of the hives that we have back here were actually sourced on site. We found some big swarms. Wow. And, you know, I mean, obviously they were doing very well, you know, in our area, and so they swarmed, and then they left to find a new home, and they're doing great. And so for anybody out there that's interested in starting hives, I would definitely say, you know, there's all kinds of resources as far as the materials and how to handle them. But, you know, make sure that you are sourcing your brood stock and your queens from a local areas. I mean, most everybody, you know, most every state has an apiary society, and a lot of times they're affiliated with like the land-grant university of that area. So a lot of resources out there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about beekeeping. You know, you know, many people are, you know, maybe afraid of bees, and of course here we are standing just, you know, right outside the flight path of bees, and they're very docile animals, and they're not too difficult to take care of either, right?
Absolutely. The biggest problems that we have out here would be, you know, obviously mite issues, and there's a couple other fungal issues and stuff that we have, because in the wintertime it is very damp and it is very cold. But, you know, there's times you can come over here and, you know, not have anything on in the winter times, or, you know, on a cloudy day, and kind of lift it up and see what's going on in there. And as long as you're not messing with them, they're really not going to mess with you. They're just trying to live and do their own thing. And so that was the reason of also having a hive out here. I mean, we have a fence, you know, far enough away to where people aren't going to be tapping it, but just to show people, you know, and give them an up close view, here is these happy, you know, big collectives. And I mean, you can come around and you can walk, and they're not going to bug you. They're just out there trying to do their job.
Let's talk a little bit about hive collapse, because like I said, that is the hot button topic nowadays. And I think it's an important reminder that, you know, about, you know, just thinking about what we're putting on our plants. You know, if we're spraying a lot of pesticides on plants that we know pollinators are going to be attracted to, you know, just thinking about like the potential danger to that hive, and just being careful about the way that we use things in the garden.
Sure. You know, even before we had these hives out here, it was something that we were actively thinking about, because, you know, let's say 10 years ago, it was really just starting to come out in the news, like, oh my gosh, what's happening to these bees? And there's been, in the local area, there's been some big bee die-offs, and a lot of it was just because of imidacloprids or some of the other neonics and stuff, the systemic insecticides. As well as, you know, some of the other things people aren't necessarily too sure. Maybe there's something going on in the ground. You know, there's a lot of different things. And so it directly influences our IPM program out here at the Oregon Garden, as far as what chemicals we're going to use, if any, what we're going to be spraying, what the times of year are. And we're not 100% organic, but we try really hard to be mindful of the pollinators and use things that are fairly natural, you know, just as good practice, but also to just keep our hives healthy. And it's really influenced a lot of the plantings that we've been doing recently.
Yeah, and so right around this area, you've provided some very easy access to perennials, and we see just down the hill you've got a bunch of echinacea, rudbeckia, things that of course they're attracted to.
Absolutely. One of the best accidents that we had was implementing a lot of Trillium hedges. A lot of people would utilize boxwood, for small garden hedging, and boxwood does flower and it does attract bees, but it's for a very specific amount of time. I was trying to come up with a planting that would just deal with some crummy soil conditions, real hot, real dry, maybe real wet at times, and just something that was green, looked nice, and maybe had a little flower on it. So I propagated up 4,000 Trillium, which it's one of the easiest things. You just dip and stick. In fact, you don't even need to dip it half the time. But got those out there, planted it, and 2 years later, we have an abundance of native pollinators, not just the European honeybees and the introduced ones, but the bumblebee populations and the mason bee populations have just exploded because that plant has about a 2.5 month blooming cycle. I guess for homeowners or people that want to introduce bees into their yard, even if they don't want to keep bees, but they want to keep them in there, the most important thing is just think about things that have a long bloom time. Anything in the mint family obviously is going to attract a lot of bees, and the lavenders, and there's so many resources out there about pollinator attractor plants, but be mindful as you're planting, put a big block of something, and then just have stuff blooming at different times of the year, or have something that blooms for a long time, and they're going to stay there because if it's easy food, they're going to keep coming back.
Outside of being wonderful pollinators, one of the other great advantages that bees have is they make honey. Have you guys been able to harvest any from your hives yet?
Absolutely. Last year was the first year that we harvested. We got 5 gallons. This year we have 2 new hives out here, and we're actually be able to do 6 gallons out of one of the hives, which is like, oh my gosh,
wow,
pretty incredible. A lot of people say, oh, are you going to sell that up there at the visitor center? And the answer is no, because it's all ours. In fact, we share it amongst the staff and some of our members and a lot of the volunteers. It's just a nice little treat for us at the end of the season to be able to have that. It's wonderful stuff too. Talk about like different pollen source and different nectar sources, and I've been able to utilize some of the wax in there to create some really nice topicals because I'm kind of a nerd, but it's wonderful stuff. Real deep amber kind of goldenrod color, and just the smells coming off, it's amazing. It's such a wonderful thing. I've learned so much about it in the last 4 years. It's fascinating.
Hardy fuchsias have always been such a fascinating plant to me. Just the vibrance of the colors, a lot of diversity inside of that, and also, to be honest with you, Ty, I've always been quite envious of people that were able to effortlessly grow them, as the intense humidity, in my neck of the woods, they don't tend to like, and so they seem to struggle. And you've got an amazing collection here. I'd love you to tell us about it.
We have this hillside right in here, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, what we're going to do with it, what we're going to plant. My experience with fuchsias was being at grandma's house and, popping off the little carpels on the fuchsia basket so they keep blooming, and it's kind of fun, and you throw them at your sister, that kind of thing. But, with hardy fuchsias, I didn't know too much about them, and I figured that they were more of a shade plant. They need real rich soils. And I'll be darned if fuchsias did not just thrive in this setting. Now, we're standing in an area where there's a little bit more shade, but further down, we have just blazing sun down there. And as long as they receive water, that's really it, water and nutrients. But I am continuously surprised at how well that they do in this climate, and especially in a challenging situation like this. They're just absolutely wonderful.
One thing I think that is a treat when we visit public gardens is the trial aspect that's going on oftentimes with these collections. So, for me as a gardener, I'm able to come see a collection of plants that it'd be impractical for me to have 135 of anything. But I can see, okay, these are the ones that either work particularly well, or say the ones that I just particularly like.
Absolutely.
And here, like I said, there's an incredible range. I'd like for you to just kind of describe the breadth of this collection.
Obviously, a lot of them are hybrid species, but we also have some just straight, Fuchsia magellanica, and those seem to be a little bit more upright, a little woodier. The other ones are a little bit more herbaceous. A few of these species, will defoliate and leave all the woody material up top, where the other ones just melt back down into the ground. We have variegated material out here, any number of different flower forms, shapes, and sizes, but we have some very small compact varieties, as well as some tall, spray, more upright. It's just, our collection kind of covers the whole gamut of forms and colors.
Another one of the super impressive collections of plants here at the Oregon Garden is the Trillium collection. And of course, they're fascinating woodland plants. And most of the ones that we see in our gardens are actually native to North America. And I think that makes it particularly special for me as a gardener.
Yeah, absolutely. They do absolutely wonderful out here in this climate. And in the springtime, the whole understory is just nothing but trilliums. And it was, you know, that and dicentra. It was just absolutely incredible. And so this collection, I think it's great too. Yeah. But we have over 7 different species of trilliums in each one of those. I can't quite recall all the specimens in between the cultivars of them, but it's just absolutely incredible. And amongst that, you know, again, I had mentioned dicentra. There, we were planning to plant some of that material out here as well as incorporating some of my favorite plants, which are tricertis or toad lilies. We've got quite a few really cool species of those out here too. So again, you know, we're really trying to focus out here now that we've got a garden that is becoming mature. Now it's time for all these amazing collections as opposed to put 1s and 2s over here. I want to throw as much material that's similar in the ground in an aesthetic way, but also just to show other people like what those look like. Because again, that's half of what we're doing, you know, out here is just put a bunch of stuff out there and just everybody can select what they like. And so these collection programs that we're just starting right now are very important to us.
Right. One thing I really like about this particular collection is the way that you've integrated a lot of different woodland plants so that you have a long season of flower.
Yeah.
So you have the Litten rose, it's going to be very early, and then it's going to move into the dicentra, and then the trilliums, and then of course into like the tricertis that's blooming right now. And so unlike many, you know, more intensive plant collections where it's just a whole field of whatever, this actually shows you the possibility of what you could do in your own garden if you had, you know, a nice shady, more woodland environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what we're going for.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the care and the culture for trilliums. I think oftentimes gardeners think that, you know, that's going to be a tricky plant, and it can be if it's not sited correctly. But what do we need to know to be successful with trillium?
You know, it's just at the end of the day, it's number one sighting. You know, look at the plant label. You know, and just kind of see or open up any number of literature pieces out there and see kind of the growing conditions. You know, like sun, shade, dry, but site prep. It's all about site prep, and just think about that plant. What would it like in nature, and just recreate that. And then once you've done that with the trilliums, once you get them established, they're going to be there for a long time. I mean, shoot, they have a root that goes down about that far. Right. And it's just proper site prep and just making sure that you're doing what the plant would love. Yeah.
Ty, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. We had a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You guys are the greatest.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Today we've had the pleasure of touring an amazing garden and learning quite a bit about the role that plants play in water remediation as well as maintaining plant collections. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at gardensmart.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And also remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.